Hello everyone, it's Sharon here, and today I am hosting a little mini workshop video showing how I colour a furry creature with my alcohol markers. And as you can see, this is a cute little Christmas mouse from Sheena Douglas's collection, and I've simply printed this onto some smooth white cardstock and then left it overnight so that the ink from the printer will cure, so that it won't smudge too much when I actually add my ink over the top. Now this is a finished example of our mouse with his little furry texture, and we're going to create something similar with another mouse which happens to be facing the other way. So before we begin, in case you haven't used alcohol markers before, it's always a good idea to put a scrap of paper underneath your piece that you're working on, and this is because the ink is naturally going to absorb through the paper a little bit, so we want to make sure that that doesn't bounce back through and discolour the paper. So what will happen is that excess ink will go into this paper, and that will make the blending a little bit easier. But as it turns out, we're not focusing too much on blending today, we're focusing on texture, which is a slightly different technique. For my colouring, I'm using Ohuhu pens, and I've got the Honolulu B version. And these pens, if I just bring one into shot, have a very fine nib. There we go. So you don't have to use this brand of pens. This is what I'm using, but you can use any brand of pens. You can use a brush tip if you want, if you're very light-handed, but if you can find one with a fine nib like the one I just showed you, that's going to be perfect for the job. So without further ado, let's begin. So I've got a selection of colours which I'll go through as I go along. The first one is going to be a very, very pale beigey colour, which turns out to be Y110 if you're using the Ohuhu pens. Now I've got a brush on one side for mine, so I'm just going to quickly colour in the whole of the mouse's body and the outside of the ears, and just get a coating of base colour on there. Doesn't have to be particularly perfect or anything, and it doesn't matter if you go outside the lines. In fact, it's quite a good idea sometimes, because if you want to cut this out, it just saves on having a white edge on your image. So there we go, the mouse is covered. It's not a perfect cover, but that doesn't matter because it's all going to add to the texture in the end. And what I want to do with this now is to let it actually dry off fully, which is quite unusual when we're using alcohol pens, because normally we like to keep the ink wet for blending. The next thing I'm going to is like a peachy yellow, which happens to be YR220. And I'm going to do that for the areas that I feel would be a little more pinky. So his nose, inside his ears, the feet, the tail, and this is where that fine nib really comes into play, because you can get into all these delicate areas, and there's a little suggestion of a paw up there, so we're going with that one as well. And I'm going to hop onto my holly leaves because I really want to give this a chance to dry properly, and for my holly leaves I'm using 3 shades of green, yellowy green. First one is GY4, and again I'm just going to colour the whole of the leaves, and because this is a fairly small area, I'm going to deal with both leaves in one go. If it was a larger area, I might just do one leaf at a time. There we go. And now I'm going to a mid-tone, which is GY3, and my holly leaves are going to be pale on the outside and dark in the middle. Some holly leaves are the opposite way round, aren't they? So you can do it entirely as you prefer, but what I'm just doing is scribbling away some colour in the middle there and letting it blend and fade out towards the edge. And then finally I'm going with a darker green, which is G470, and I'm just going to add a touch of shadow in the very middle. if we want, we can go back to that later. And I'm also going to make that stalk green. And I have to say, you don't need these exact colours. You just use whatever you've got. You just want some green for the holly and some browns for your mouse, or even some greys. And now I'm going to just colour those berries in as well. So I picked a red. This is a very pale red, R1. And then I've got R8, which I'm just going to use just add a little bit of shadow. And these are so tiny, these berries, they're probably about 3mm wide, that they really just don't need any colour at all. They just need a dot of colour. Right, let's get on to the main event now. So whilst we've been doing those little bits, hopefully our mouse has dried enough, and the idea is that I want to now add streaks of colour that look like fur. So I really don't want them to blend in, and what I'm going to do is use a series of colours, gradually getting darker, to add that in. So my first colour is Y260, and I'm going to go in, start somewhere that feels less intimidating, so maybe the ear, and holding the pen very upright so that the point is literally facing downwards. I'm just starting to add little flicks, some big, some small. I'm trying to stop them being all in a straight line, but I'm kind of going in the direction that I think his fur would go. And don't be put off by this, because it's, you know, I'll be honest, it's not going to look very good to start with. So it's all about building up that colour. And he's got a little ear there, so I'm just putting that one in. Okay, and then coming down to where his arms are, we're doing the same. And just imagining where the light might be. I think he's going to have a little bit of shine on his side here, on his shoulder. His arms are going to be lighter in the middle, so I'm just adding some colour to the edge. And then coming down to his belly, this area in the middle is going to be the light area. And really, Sheena's kind of given you clues with the amount of dense fur she's put in. And then on his leg, his hair's sort of going to come round in a circular fashion from side to side. And that's the first bit done. So if I just bring that up briefly, hopefully you can see it's not looking too special at the moment, but it literally is just a load of little lines. And I'm just going to add some in here as well on his shoulder. And now I'm going to go for a darker colour, so I'm moving on to Y270. And I'm going to do the same thing again, but not go so far out with my colour. And this adds a little bit of depth and texture. I might just put a little bit of darkness under his eye there. And again, just thinking about where would those shadows be. So once you get into the flow of this, it's actually quite a mindful thing to do, because you're basically just adding lots of little flicks. And there's no right or wrong. So again, trying to leave a pale area in his belly, but a little bit of a darkness in there. Now might be a good time to add a little bit of shadow to his feet and his tail if you want to. And trying to make sure I don't end up with just a straight line on my flicking. So there we are. Now you can see we've got two colours going on. We're going to do the same thing again with a darker colour, and this one is E240, and this time coming in just in the very darkest areas. To denote that shadow, but the same technique essentially, so little flicks. And this is going to, although it's a darker brown, it is going to blend to some extent with the colours that are underneath it, so it's not going to be quite as dark as the original pen. And if you want, you can go really heavy in the darker areas. And there we have our third colour. So just to bring that up, hopefully you can start to see that there are different shades in there. Now, if you like, you can leave it at that, but there is some extra work we can do here which will really lift this, and that is by adding pencil. Now, it doesn't need to be a posh pencil, it just needs to be a pencil that has a fine point. Doesn't matter if it's a watercolour pencil or oil based or wax based or just regular colour pencils, because we're not trying to blend. What we're doing again is adding more texture. So I've got a brown here, a darkish brown, and again using that point I'm going to start to add extra flicks and bring in that texture. And because it's pencil, this is not going to fade or blend with everything else that we put down. So the important thing is just to keep twisting the pencil round as you go, and really just bring in those little flicks of fur. Just let the odd one stray into the light area as well, so we don't have too many defined lines. So that's quite quick to do, and that adds a little bit more depth into our little mouse. And then we're going to go with a grey because we're going to add some shadow. Again, it's helpful to have a nice pointy end to your pencil. And this time, rather than flicking, we're just adding some very light colour where we think the shade would be. And I'm not pressing hard at all, I'm just letting that grey lay on the top there. So behind his arm, I'd expect there to be some shadow. The sort of light is coming towards him this way, so I'm just going to add the shadow where his leg is going to cast a shadow, and also under his belly. And I can also add some shadow onto his legs. If you want, you can soften that with some flicks as well. And there we've got a bit more depth to our mouse. And then finally, if we want to vitalise those whiter areas, we can go with a white pencil, or a charcoal pencil is good, if that's what I've got here, and just add some white back in there. Charcoal pencils, by the way, are very cheaply available on Amazon, and they really add a little bit of soft highlight because they're basically chalky, so you can add it and then soften it with your finger, which is really nice. So there we are, one mouse complete. There we go. So he's come out a little bit darker, I think. If we want, we can add back some more streaks if we want to. So I'm going with a sort of medium colour and just bringing in some extra here, because I felt like there was a white area. But there we have mouse number 2, and there we have mouse number 1. And that is how you colour a furry creature with your alcohol pens. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope to see you back again another time. Bye!